Hello Internet! Today we're going to be looking at PowerShell. Specifically, we're going to be looking at how to handle CSV data in PowerShell. So if you're not familiar with PowerShell, PowerShell is a script, or not a scripting language, it's a command line interface for Windows, and it actually now works thanks to .NET Core on Mac OS and Linux as well. So you can bring that pretty much anywhere you go. It's used a lot by Windows administrators, which I am not, so I am not very knowledgeable about that, but it's really useful for handling those kind of things for administrating networks. But the cool thing is it's all .NET based, and what that means is that you can access every single .NET element in your scripts. You can import your .NET DLLs into PowerShell and actually reference things. And it's actually a fairly interesting language. You'll kind of see what I mean as we go through this. But it does a little bit more than, say, Bash would, or if you're familiar with Windows, the command prompt. Those are a little bit more basic. PowerShell is kind of a step up from there. It's sort of somewhere between Bash and C#. It gives you some of that typed goodness and also some of the non-typed command liney things. So we're starting at Windows Explorer because I want to kind of demonstrate a few things first. First off, if you're at a folder that you want to actually open with, say, PowerShell, you can actually just type this into the Explorer and it just opens a window for you. The cool thing is that doesn't just work for PowerShell, it also works for the command line. So you can open either of these in pretty much anything you do, and it will just work. What we're going to be using is going to be the PowerShell ISE, which I can actually just type by doing PowerShell space ISE. And you'll see it starts PowerShell, and then it starts the integrated scripting environment for PowerShell. And so this is sort of a IDE almost for PowerShell. And so you can see we get a little bit extra here. First, here is where our script will go. Here is just a normal PowerShell window, so we can actually just execute lines there. And on the right side, we actually have an entire list of every command that we may want to use. So this is a good way to kind of manage things, and if you're not familiar with the language, it actually gives you a ton of really handy things. So what we're going to be doing is importing a CSV. So before we do that, we need to actually find our CSV. Obviously, I could go to Explorer and find it, but I could actually just do ls here. Can I zoom? Yeah. So we're going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see that, hopefully. And so there we go. So we have one directory, PowerShell example, with a single file in it called the periodicelements.csv. And so the first thing you'll notice, there isn't a command called ls. Well, that's going to be hard, but there's no ls. That doesn't exist. The way PowerShell is named is everything does a verb and then sort of the action. So the verb is separated by a dash. So if you want to get something, it's going to start with get dash something, whatever you want to get. So if you want to get an object, that's actually not how you do that, because that's not it. I'm kind of new to PowerShell. I use it occasionally, but I tend to kind of learn. If you haven't figured that out, I kind of learn as I use the thing, kind of see if it works or not. But here are a bunch of the things that you can get. Lots of networking things. There are some like invoke REST method. So if you want to call some sort of REST method, you can actually do this. And if I click this, we get all of the parameters that you can have. So here's the URI you would call, and then all of the other optional things like the body, if you're posting to it or whatever. All of that's there, so you can kind of do that. What we're going to do is import CSV. And so if I just click this, we get a delimiter, which is just a comma. We don't actually need that though. That's by default, it will just pick that. And then we just need the path, which we can actually just give it as periodic elements or period elements.csv. And so I can just run this. If I run it, it just actually imports it, and we get that, which is just a list of all of the periodic elements. And it's got a whole bunch of stuff. This is just some data that I pulled from online, so I don't know how accurate it is. Just from quick reviewing, it seemed fairly accurate. But I am not a chemist, so I have no idea what the heat evaporation of scandium is. So that's not right. I guess I'm sorry. We're not going to really be using that. This is all just as an example. The cool thing here is you'll notice everything kind of got pulled in, but everything's kind of separated. It knows what everything is. So we have the name. We know this one is calcium. We know its atomic symbol is Ca. It's got an atomic number of 20 with an atomic weight of 40. So 20 neutrons and 20 protons. Protons? Oh my god. It's been a while. So anyway, point we're getting at here is PowerShell actually, just from that command, just from import-csv, we actually figured out everything. And the way it knows this is actually, if you look at our CSV file, these names are the first row in our element, or in our CSV table. And so it's actually just taking that first row and saying these are the names for each of the columns, and then taking those, delimiting them by the comma because that's the default, and then assigning them. And so if we want to turn this into sort of a script, quick, we can do import CSV, and we're just going to import periodic elements.csv. And that's cool. That should do exactly what it just did, like that. But let's say this isn't really what I want. Let's say I want this to, how does this work? There is a way, format table, I think that's correct. So if I run this, we get it in a slightly different format. So what it's actually doing is all of this information is not, in Bash, it's all just strings. It's all just data, just text thrown at you. PowerShell, it's a little bit different. These are actual objects. And so we can actually operate on those like they're actual objects. So I'm not piping in a bunch of text that's kind of all just delimited, and then this format table has to be able to figure that out. Instead, it's actually taking those objects that I was just piping out. This object, oops, that didn't work. But it's taking this object here, unnuctium, that probably is the bad one because that's way at the end of the periodic table, at the end of the rarest. But anyway, it's taking that's an object, passing it into the format table, and then if we go all the way to the bottom, we get the same thing just in our table. And so everything is just passed this way, which is cool. So we can kind of change how everything goes that way. There's a number of these format things. We can do a list. I think that's what we already had, yeah. And I thought there was a grid. Nope. I must be mistaken. But there was table, volume, hex. I don't really know what I'm doing, but we'll do volume, sure. What does that do? Guess that doesn't work. So I assume that's probably expecting something more than I gave it. Let's find out. I'm actually going through and actually listing things like this. But we can actually do like dash question mark. How do we get? Yeah, so dash question mark is going to get you help on whatever it is. So you can actually see this ls command that I've been using isn't actually ls. That's not the name of the command. The command is actually named GetChildItem, and it has 3 aliases. So dir, if you're familiar with command prompt, ls if you're familiar with bash or whatever, and gci, I don't know where that's from, but I imagine that's also coming from some other system. But you can add, to my knowledge, you can add additional aliases if you want to. I've never really experimented with that, but it should be possible. But you can kind of see the syntax that it's expecting. So there's filters and all of that other fun stuff. So you can do whatever you want with that. But we don't really care about that. Instead, let's start actually working with these objects as they actually are. Because this is one of my favorite parts about using PowerShell compared to, say, Bash. You can like grep things in Bash and it kind of works. But with PowerShell, you can actually do a few additional things. So let's, what is it? Where? And so there is a special symbol, which is the $ and underscore, which represents the current element. So if you're doing like where, it's actually going to do an iteration over every element that's returned. So if this is returning a list, in this case, of periodic elements, each of these instances is actually going to be a single one of those, and it's just going to be invoked for each of them. And so let's say where the name is equal to silver. So this should, if I'm correct, pull out silver from this list. And let's throw that into a format table. There we go. So if I just throw that into a table, because why not? That should get us silver in a table by itself, like so. And so now we have this table with just silver in there. And that's all just coming from this single line, which I think is really, really handy, because you can do a lot of stuff with this. Let's say, what's a good thing to search for? We've got melting points. Let's find everything that we could melt on our stove, for example. So let's say 400 degrees. So let's say less than 400. I think that might be Celsius. I don't actually have units on these things because I didn't get the data, but we'll just reference the melting point and see what we get. So here are all of the elements with the melting point. You'll see it actually included some of the ones that have no value because it didn't really know. But everything else should have a melting point less than 400. It is very hard for me to tell if that's working because I think this format table is kind of broken due to just zooming in, or I've done something horribly wrong. Both are very good options. So let's see here. Melting point 2000 something. Gonna go out on a limb? Probably not, right? Yeah. 1800. I don't think I'm doing this right. just going out on a limb here. And why would that be? Huh. Melting point less than 400? I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. You will notice though, you don't use like less than symbols or like SQL like knots or whatever, or that, or this. None of that is PowerShell-y. It's more Bash-like syntax. So you do equal will be like this. I think not equal is like that. And then there's a greater than, less than or equal. I don't know how to do that. Less than or equal to, or for case insensitive or case sensitive. So you can do case sensitive or case insensitive, less than or equal to. Which actually that might be the problem we're having, is it may be thinking that this is a string and not an int. So that may be what's causing that, and we're getting weird results for that reason. But there's a whole bunch of things here. There's like, so if you're doing like regular expression style things and you kind of want to get something that's similar but not necessarily the same, and there's a whole bunch more. But that is just where, and it's actually not where. Again, if we just open this up, it's actually where object. And so there's a number of other ones. There's, I think, an order. What is it called? Order by. I don't think that's it. Nope. There is a way to select, which will select object. What's the best way to find these? Compare, group, measure, select, sort. Sort is what we wanted. So instead of doing all of that fun stuff that wasn't really working, let's try to sort things. You can actually, a lot of these have aliases, so sort. Yep, so sort object should have an alias for sort. So we can actually just do similar to what we were doing for where. We can actually just use sort instead. And I would like to sort by, it's already sorted by the atomic number, so that's kind of boring. Let's sort it by the name. And I think that's the syntax we need to use. Again, I don't really know, but there we go. Zirconium is at the back, so I assume that actually worked. Yeah. Americium, why do you keep going to the bottom? That's so annoying. But yes, it is sorted by name, which means it actually worked. Yay! So yeah, that's sort of what I wanted to cover, is just sort of a way to work with CSVs and also just kind of do all of this fun stuff. The cool thing is it doesn't just have to be CSVs. So if I really want to mess around with this, let's say I'm going to sort this. Actually, I'm going to say where. What's a good thing? Let's say gold. So where the name equals gold. And so this is going to find gold in our periodic elements and return that. And then let's export. Does this work? There is not just support for CSVs, but you can also support JSON. So we can actually convert to JSON. And just with that, we should get a fully structured JSON element out for gold. So this will have all of the object property names as the name there, and everything else will just be as you would expect it in a JSON object. And you can actually invert all of this. So if you need to convert from CSVs to JSON or JSON to CSV, you can do it in a line, and that's really, really powerful. And a lot of people just write scripts everywhere to do this, but you don't. You can just do this. And there's transformation things. So if you need to actually like rename some of these things, so if you're converting from CSV to a JSON object, but you also need to insert an extra field like an ID or something, that's possible as well. I'm not going to go into that because I'm already at the limits of my knowledge just off the top of my head. So I will leave it here. I don't know. I kind of wanted this to be sort of a really quick like intro to some of the cool things that I find in PowerShell. I don't know. This seems like one of the things that I use the most, just because I'm always using JSON or a CSV to kind of do things. And so this kind of feels just powerful to me. And the fact that you can now use this on, say, Linux or your Mac makes it even more powerful. So I guess I'll leave that there, and I'll let you guys decide if this is useful or not. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So if you guys have feedback, or you think this is cool and you want more of these kind of videos, or you don't, let me know in the comments and I will definitely look into that. But that's it for this video. So till next time, see you, internet.